These are some Haag-Streit power supplies. These are the newer style versus the big black power supplies. And they've evolved over the years. Of course, now everything is LED. Right now everything is LED. But while they were developing these power supplies, they went from the older style, which was turned on by turning the selector 0 to 2, and then they developed to this style where the on-off is not controlled by here but by a separate switch. And while Haag-Streit was developing their LED fixations, they had to create a power supply that could power those LED fixations. And the earliest models didn't. They didn't power up an LED, but as they developed an LED fixation, they created a power supply that could power it and also could power a non-LED fixation by use of a jumper. And so these power supplies, if they were made where they could power up an LED fixation, they would have a jumper. Here's the difference between a LED fixation, chinrest, and a bulb fixation, chinrest. These power supplies could be hooked up to either one, either an LED fixation or a bulb on your chinrest. Now on this type, when you turn it on, the LED lights up. I've got it connected to the plug in the back. And the same power supply, if you install a jumper so that it can power up a bulb fixation, which I have rigged up here, you turn it on, you'll notice that the bulb is blinking. And that's because that's almost like a ready mode until you turn your power on. Then the bulb fixation will stay lit. But if you turn the power all the way down to minimum, then your fixation is going to blink. So if you happen to have a bulb fixation where the fixation bulb is blinking, it's just because this is on this type of power supply, the bulb will blink when it's at minimum. Now when it's on here in one of these, when it's on the bulb, it's going to be lit as soon as you turn it on. It's going to stay lit like that. So just wanted to show you the difference of that. Now on this one, you'll see that the switch is blinking. So we're going to replace that. It should be a solid color when it's on. So we're going to replace that in a minute. But I just wanted to show you. Now if we were to take one of these apart, take it out of the case, which would mean you would have to take off the knob first, and it's either a Torx torques 10, and then you would have to take, or it could be a regular screw there. You'd have to take that off, and then you'd have to take off, there's 3 screws up here, and they could either be a Torx or Phillips. They changed them up. So if you were to take this out and you turn it over to find the location of the jumper location, it's going to be near where the wires come in, and the location of this jumper is right there. I don't know if you can see it. There's 2 little pins sticking up, and that's where you would install the jumper. And here's the jumper. It's just a little plastic plug that connects both pins, and you put it right there. And the reason they install that is because the difference between the bulb and the LED is that the LED can't take as much power as the bulb. If you apply the same voltage to the LED as you do the bulb, it's going to burn out the LED. So they put a resistor in line here. There's a resistor. And when the jumper is off, the voltage has to go through the resistor, and then it won't blow your LED. So anytime there's LED involved, there has to be some resistor in place so that it doesn't burn up the LED. So your responsibility is to find out if you're going to be hooking up a different kind of chinrest, depending on whatever your fixation is. Your power supply needs to be prepared for that type of fixation. So here's a variety of chinrests, and over here we have LED fixation, and here's another LED. But over here we have bulb fixation. And here, these are bulb fixations. So depending on what fixation you're hooking up to your power supply, you're going to need to assign that power supply that type of voltage to power up your fixation without blowing it. If you have the bulb fixation and you have your power supply set on LED, it's not going to light up. Same way with here. If you have your power supply set up for bulb, then you're going to blow your LEDs out. While Haag-Streit was developing their new power supplies and developing the LED fixation, they began making power supplies that would say with resistor. And if it says with resistor, that means that there's a place for a jumper where you can have either an LED fixation or a bulb fixation, depending on if you're going to use that jumper to bypass the resistor. If If it doesn't have a jumper, then it's going to go through the resistor. So you still need to take it off and look and see if the jumper is installed. If the jumper's not there, then your resistor is in place, and this will power up an LED fixation. But if you don't want that, if you want more power, then you're going to have to bypass that resistor and put a jumper on there to jump and bypass that resistor. They were still developing, and this one says without a resistor. That means that there's no place in here to put a jumper. It doesn't have any pins where you can install. So if you have a power supply that says without resistor, that means you can only power up a bulb fixation. But there's one exception. Now if you had a power supply that didn't have a resistor in it, sometimes they would put a resistor inside the wire itself. So if your power supply says that it doesn't have a resistor, you will need to take the fixation cable off to see if there is a resistor in here. Some models had that. It wasn't in the power supply. It was actually in the plug. So if you're still not certain if it has a resistor, you need to take this plug cap off and view. And yeah, there is no resistor in here. So you would have to have a resistor. So you would have to have a resistor to power up an LED fixation. Okay, we're working on the newer style of these, and we would take it out. This one has the jumper already in, but I'm going to take it off. So now it's back on. Attaching if you're converting with an LED kit, this is all important because your LED kit the power supply will come from the factory to power up an LED fixation. But your fixation might be a bulb because you're converting the whole slit lamp to an LED except your chinrest. So you would need to go into your power supply and remove that jumper if you were going to use an old style bulb fixation. And if we were going to change the power button on-off switch on this type of power supply, you would have to take off the wires and notice that the wires on top have an X marked on them to remind you that these are on top and that the off is in this position where you can see it. If it were turned over, it would be opposite. When it's turned up like this, the off is up here, and these two wires have the X on them. To take these off, remember the brown are going to be towards the outside, and the blues are going to be on the inside. And if you take your screwdriver, you can pry these off. Okay, and you could just move these out of the way. Now, the switch, it's got these raised edges on here that click in. But in here, there's two things you're going through. Not only going through the frame, but there's also an extra locking tab that locks it into your frame better. So you're going to have to get it through both of those. So the best thing I think you could do is first get this plate off, and then you can work on pulling it out of the frame. And one way you could do that, now that these wires are out of the way, you can get some pliers, and you're going to be bending these tabs so that you can slip the locking piece off. If you stick your screwdriver in, your pliers in there, and on the top and the bottom, and squeeze, then you can get your screwdriver and pry, get it started. And once you have one side started, then you can come over to the other side with your pliers, squeeze, and with your screwdriver pry the other side off. And then you can get this little locking tab out. There's some rivets in here, so it's a little tight, but you can work it around that. Now if you happen to have bent this, go ahead and straighten it out to get it nice and straight so that it will lock on better. And you'll notice that there's one of these corners has a beveled edge on it. That's because that's going right at the corner. So when you're putting this back on, this beveled edge is going to go right here on this corner, so it's not sticking out. It's going to be beveled. And once you have that plate off, then you might be able to just pull the plug out, or you might have to squeeze it also again to get your switch out. And once you've gotten it out, if you want to put it back in, remember the off is on up top here, and place that inside. Get your locking tab, make sure it's flat, and find out where that beveled edge is. And slip it over. You have to work around these rivets. So you have it on. You might be able to squeeze it on. Or you might have to use your needle nose to squeeze both sides of that locking plate to get it back on. Once that's in, it should be tight back into your frame. And then you've got to hook your wires back up. Those with the X's are on top, so leave those to the side. These down here, the brown is on the outside, so it goes on the bottom. Blue on the inside. Same here. Black and blue. Make sure they're all on. Hook it up with power, turn your switch on to make sure it's working, and then you can reinstall it inside your casing. After you put everything back on and you're reinstalling, remember, before you tighten up your knob the rest of the way, put some type of something in here to keep it away from the casing while you tighten it up, so that it's not rubbing on the case when it turns. When you remove that, you've got just a little bit of space in there, and it's going to be nice and smooth. And then put your cover back on. I know this was a lot of information, and I hope I didn't confuse you, but hopefully you're smart enough to figure out exactly what I was saying, and when you actually are seeing it, it'll make more sense. I did want to show you the LED power supply, that it also has the choice between a LED or a bulb fixation, and when it comes from the factory it's set for LED, but if you want to make sure so that you don't burn up your fixation, just take the back off and look inside. And what's neat about these is that it actually tells you where to install the jumper. It's actually got 3 leads, and wherever the jumper is installed will tell you what it's going to power up. If you can read that, it says bulb and LED. And this little jumper, if you were going to take that, change it from one to the other, just pull this little jumper off. It's a little different, but similar. And you'll notice it's got 3 pins, and you would connect the bulb. If you had a old style bulb chinrest fixation. But if it's on bulb, it's going to burn up the LED. So you got to make sure that this little jumper is installed on the 2 pins right under the LED. So I always check mine, even though they come from the factory set on LED. I like to make sure. And then put your top back on. And then screw it back down onto your top. Just wanted to show you the diagram of your plug, amp plug. You're going to have the green, the yellow, white, brown, and the green are going to be your main bulb, and the brown and the white are going to be your fixation. And if you get confused on what they are, just remember that the pin by itself, that's always going to be on the fixation. So if you know that's the fixation, you know the wire beside it is going to be fixation. It's going to be brown and white, brown and white. Yellow and green are the main. And another thing is the pluses are always going to be on the outside. So when you're hooking everything up, just remember that the hots, the plus, is going to be on the outside. Fixation over here, the main over here. And of course, if you sometimes the wires are backwards, and on your LED cap you can switch the jumpers or the wires from plus to minus so that your LED will work, but it will show you in the instructions. And if you needed the part number of the switch, I think that's it. And don't forget your locking tab. You need that too, so don't lose that.